the younger people are much more attuned to, mental health and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
When they've got these stoic leaders like you mentioned, your workforce don't believe you anyway.
Right.
They just
You're full of it.
they just see you as a BS artist, right?
Right.
It's and behind your back, they're all laughing about you.
Yeah. Look at this person. They got it. They have it so together, don't they?
Yeah.
That's one of the highlights from my conversation with Alan Cox, founder of EverYellow, a groundbreaking mental fitness app. We talked about his unique perspective on mental health and resilience and his framework for changing your thought patterns so you can achieve mental fitness. It's like circuit training for your brain. You might be asking, what does this have to do with communication skills? Well, if you want to be an effective communicator, you have to first start with the insides. To get the rest of the answer for that question, keep listening. Welcome to the Communication 24/7 podcast, where we communicate about how we communicate. I'm your host, Jennifer Furlong. Alan is a mental health change maker and entrepreneur with over 30 years of experience in innovation. And after surviving an abusive childhood and overcoming mental health challenges, he experienced a life-changing transformation on his journey to mental fitness. Alan is now devoted to helping millions of others achieve mental fitness as well. He has studied Taoism, Buddhism, psychology, and neuroscience. As the founder of EverYellow, a groundbreaking mental fitness app, Alan passionately shares his unique perspective on mental health and resilience, empowering others to live more fulfilling lives. And y'all know I am all about the empowerment. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome, and it's I'm honored to be here as well.
I kind of gave like the brief overview of who you are in this moment in time. Do you mind just taking a few minutes to explain to the audience a little bit about your journey? What has led you to this point? Like, why have you decided to focus on this area of mental wellness, empowerment? This entire area, being a life coach. What was the catalyst for that? And what has this been like for you?
I've had a very long kind of turbulent history, I guess. And it's really what's led me to what I'm doing today is, and I'll go back over, what that in more detail in a second, but really as a kind of a framing, the experience that I had in terms of my transformation and the impact that had not only on me, it basically illuminated for me just how much most of us are actually missing out on life, on their relationships, on their work opportunities, and all of those things, really because of the operating system that's in their head. Right, quite quickly, I had quite an abusive childhood. I grew up as a young man that didn't think that his parents loved him, very, very low self-esteem. When, looking back, I would have had, without even realizing it, I would have had a very low level of resilience. So when you reach adulthood and you take on things like mortgage, family, and what have you, that's when the cracks really start to happen, because you can't like fall back on your parents or anything. There's no safety net anymore. So that's really when I started, getting bouts of quite serious depression. And there's been probably 4 major life events that tipped me over the edge, and I became suicidal basically. One of them, I had quite a serious back injury at work where I couldn't walk for the best part of a year. When I kind of got myself back up and running, I completely the wrong time. This is back in the day when your younger listeners won't even remember this, because there was actually a time when the internet didn't really exist, right? And
I remember those days.
So at the time, the whole web industry was kind of going ballistic. So I'd already been working in that industry, and my wife wasn't working because she was expecting her third child. And I basically thought, I'm going to go out and be a consultant. And almost straight away, so I basically got rid of quite a secure job. And within a month or so of me going out on my own, there was the .com crash, right? And
Perfect
it was
timing.
Yeah. And then I just it took me quite a few years to kind of get myself out of that. Then there was I had a team growing up around me. Then there was the global financial crisis. Bang again, and all these times they kind of really took a toll on me. And then the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, was things were going really, really well for me. I had an agency where I had like about 12 staff. We was doing, lots. We had a very well respected brand within New Zealand, and we was doing international work. We just invested heavily in getting our own offices with our signage outside and everything like that. And this was also the days when there was no, we all know about cloud services. All of our data's on the cloud now, but at the time that wasn't really a thing. So all of our data and systems and everything were all in this air-conditioned room at the back of the office, right? And we're on the third floor of this really beautiful building. It was it was like the old post office, like from 200 odd years ago in New Zealand. And that's when, one lunchtime I just went out for a stroll, and that's when my world changed. There was a massive earthquake struck. I had literally just walked into a doorway when bricks fell down from everywhere. Not only was that a horrific experience, our office was basically, we wasn't allowed in there. That really affected business, there was nowhere to work from. And that ultimately led to me having losing the business and having a major mental breakdown. And the severity was such that, I had no idea what a breakdown was actually beforehand. I thought when someone said, they're having a mental breakdown, it's like, you're a bit depressed or something. Right. What I now know is your brain is actually shutting down parts of its systems that it doesn't really need, so it can heal itself, so it can survive, so it can stop you from dying, right? And I couldn't walk very far. My speech was slurred. I could only stay awake for like a couple of hours at a time. I described the time as just being in a pitch black tunnel, zero hope whatsoever, and not knowing what way was out or even if there was a way out. And it was a terrible time. Then one day, either chance or divine intervention, however you want to put it, I watched a TV program on telly about depression. And that was my turning point, because up until that time, number one, I just didn't have any hope. I couldn't see any way out. But what that program basically showed me, which I had no understanding of prior, is that when you go through depression, especially for a prolonged period of time, your brain changes. There's parts of your brain, and I'm not talking about just your chemistry, but like your hippocampus, which is a very, very crucial part of your brain that's used for mood and other things, or has an influence on mood and other things, that in my brain probably would have been reduced in size by 20 to 30%.
Wow.
And and that actually was really great news for me, because like you go from a position thinking I'm just a broken person, and that's the way life is. I either accept that or I end it, right?
Mm.
But what that showed me is, oh my God, that there is actually something tangible here, like
Mhm.
especially being trained in engineering. And yeah, what the program also showed is all of these things can be reversed, and they can be reversed with really simple things. They can be reversed by actually spending time in nature and
Mhm.
feeling the ground with your bare feet, and
Mhm.
that's just one of thousands of different things that you can do. And that's when I went on a journey of discovery. I just wanted to learn how to fix myself, right? A fundamental shift happened in my mind. What I now understand after a decade of studying is that if you think of mental well-being, and I just want to be really clear here, I'm not talking about specific mental illnesses such as schizophrenia or anything like that. In terms of general mental well-being, if you think of a continuum, say between 1 and 10, 1 is like you are probably suicidal, and 10 you're more enlightened than the Dalai Lama or something, right? And around the 3 mark is the point where, technically speaking, you're mentally well or mentally unwell, right? So
Mm.
if you was say a 3.5 or a 4, and you went to the doctor and said, look, I'm depressed, I need some pills or whatever. If they're a good doctor, they will do an assessment on you. There's a proper assessment that they would do. And if you're above a 3, they'll say you're actually fine. You're probably stressed. You probably need to take a bit of time off work. You probably need to think about making some changes in your routine,
Mhm.
whatever those things might be. The thing is that if you think of kind of like a bell curve, most of the population are around 5.5, around that figure.
Okay.
And 70-80% of the population are probably around between, say, 4 and 6. So most of us that aren't even mentally unwell, we're in this state that I call just okay. We're going through the motions of life, and we don't even know that there's another way. When I basically moved beyond that kind of normal range, it just brought profound change to my life. My relationship with my wife got 100 times better. My performance at work increased dramatically. I become more creative. I become more innovative. When I tell people this story, they don't believe me sometimes, but like I can have somebody walk up to me in the street and offer to fight me or something.
Mhm.
This I actually had this happen about 6 months ago, where this guy in a very crowded car park where there's loads and loads of youngsters was basically doing burnout, and I
Right.
kind of just went, like that to him. And
Like, what are you doing?
and I don't know if the guy was either on drugs or sick or whatever, but he'd come screaming up to me, shouting in my face, basically offering to fight me and all that. And because of what my mind had become, I just was completely calm and said, "No, I don't want to fight you," and I just walked off. Right.
Right. Right.
Um, but the even more powerful thing is that within a few minutes of that event, it was not even in my mind anymore. I moved on to other things. Whereas I think most people, they would have gone into the office saying, "Oh, you would never believe what happened to me just now,"
Mhm.
and that will probably ruin their day. And that's just one example of many, many things that have changed for me.
Mhm.
I very rarely get sick now. When everyone's getting colds, if I do get one, it's fleeting, very
Mhm.
very minor. I don't know if it's because of this, but I haven't had COVID. I just never get flu or anything like that. And, it's not like a Pollyanna thing, like I genuinely look at the world with more clarity, more optimism. I'm a much better listener and all of those kinds of things. So really that's my journey. And I wanted to give that to other people. Today, I'm the founder of an impact venture that makes an app that solves a big problem in the mental health app space, which I'm sure we'll come to later. I just couldn't really be happier. I know that our app is helping thousands of people around the world. It's helped, although it wasn't designed to do this, it's helped people out of self-harm situations where, seeing a psychologist wasn't helping. So look, I've already succeeded in that respect, but I just want to keep on going and go beyond thousands to millions. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I'm so grateful that you're here sharing your story. I think it's really important for people to be able to hear everyone share stories like this, because I think it's very easy for us as individuals to pretend, right? We put on that mask. And like you said earlier, we kind of we go about our day being okay, right? Everything it's okay, without even realizing that there is a different way, a better way, or maybe we hope that there is a different or a better way, but we're not quite sure how to tap into that. And so the more people that I can have conversations like this with, and the reason I wanted you to come onto a show like this, where we focus on communication, is I firmly believe that this is where it begins. The quality of your conversations with others and the quality of the conversation that you have with yourself is going to have an impact on your mental well-being. Can you take us back just a little bit? Can you pinpoint a moment or a time, or maybe just an area that you can think of where you were like, you can remember your mindset shifting in that the language you were using, or the phrases you were using, or just your quality of conversation that was happening, that internal dialogue that we all have, especially in difficult moments. We all have those peaks and those valleys. So I think we can all appreciate, everything that you've gone through. Can you pinpoint a time or a moment where you could tell, wow, this is a fundamental shift in how I'm actually thinking about these things, how I'm having this internal dialogue about a certain situation or a moment in time or an event that's happening that normally probably would have sent you off the rails, and that now it's like, okay, I can tell just how I'm communicating with myself. The quality of it is different. If you are feeling stuck or disappointed with where you are personally or professionally, and you want to level up your life, then I have a book for you. It's called Cracking the Rich Code and is a #1 Amazon International bestseller. I, along with a group of diverse experts from around the world, have teamed up to provide you with powerful strategies and insights that will help you achieve greater success. This book offers some valuable entrepreneurial insights that will strengthen your life, your business, and your effectiveness overall. Use the code podcast and get a 20% discount when you order from my website, www.communication247.com.
Yeah. So just to kind of put some, I will answer that. To put some kind of framing around it first, is that if you think of what's going on in our brain as being like a piece of software, right? Like if you think of it as like being an operating system, right? That software has two very distinct components, right? It has say like all of the logic and functionality, if you like, so that you know, if this happens and this happens, then do this or whatever, right?
Right.
And it also has data, right? And that data has been, whether you realize it or not, every single experience that you've ever had gets stored away, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you think about yourself, others, joyful experiences, bad experience, all of that data gets stored away. So if you think of a real computer program and there's something wrong with the programming, right? It takes 2 and 2 and it gives 5 instead of 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something wrong with the actual functioning, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you layer on top of that, feeding it bad data, right? That's even worse, right? So there would have been a time, and let's just think of a really run of the mill experience, right? Is that driving on the way to work, some guy comes up in a car on the side, just almost takes the front of your car off, trying to get over, and that operating system in my brain, for whatever reason, would have said something like, when that happens, that person is trying to harm you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's
And
right.
that's the bad data.
Mm-hmm.
And the operating system says, when someone's trying to kill you in this situation or harm you, you press on the horn, give rude gesticulations out of the window, and you get angry, right? That's the operating system saying that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole thing, that whole data set and operating system has been built up over decades, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it becomes completely unconscious and habitual. Like you don't think about how you drive a car, do you? It just happens.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You don't when you ride a bike, you don't think to yourself, put left foot down, right foot down, turn this to, you just ride a bike. It just happens automatically, and that's what most of us would do. So when I got an understanding of that, or when anyone gets an understanding of that, you can start to say, right, I'm going to start to question what my thoughts and behaviors are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually really, really hard. What happens in like the first phase of transformation, if you like, is something like that will happen, and you'll have those habitual reactions again,
That's
right?
right.
But afterwards, as soon as it happens, you go, hold on a minute, what am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do I really know? Is it really true that guy was trying to harm me? No, we don't know that to be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it a rational response for me to do what I did? So you start having that after the event kind of taking yourself to task kind of thing.
Right.
And when the first time you kind of really know that something is shifting is when something trivial like that happens. And it could be someone doesn't someone if I was going into, say, a store, and the person in front didn't hold the door open for me, I would get incredibly angry, and make all kinds of
How
assumptions.
rude.
Yeah, exactly right. But what you'll start to notice is things like that will happen, and you'll think to yourself, oh, don't worry about it. That person has probably got a lot going on in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's when you really notice that a shift is happening, because
Mm-hmm.
you're consciously thinking a better story, right?
That's right.
And then what happens is, as you continue doing that, when those things happen, it doesn't even register consciously. It just it's and and the way I kind of describe it, what happens is, there's a process, it's called neuroplasticity, where you're literally rewiring pathways in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I kind of try to like analogize this is, imagine you're in, like, say, a big cornfield or something, right? And you want to go from here to, A to B, and there's a well-trodden path that you've walked 1,000 times before, and so when you go into that field, you're naturally going to walk down that path because it's easier. It's hard to break a new path through this other direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you consciously think, right, actually, I don't want to go to B, I want to go to C, you just need to understand that it's not going to be instantaneous, right? Like,
That's right.
it's going to be
Yeah.
a bit of effort, and the more you walk that path, eventually that pathway becomes completely clear and automatic, right? But here's the thing, right? While you've been doing that, what has happened with the other path, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
sorry,
Mm-hmm.
it's basically cleared away,
Right.
and that literally does happen physically in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
There's these neural circuits that, like, when something happens, it will send a signal to make you think or behave or feel a certain way. And if you consciously work to make that happen a different way, that old pathway will eventually die away, quite literally.
I really like the idea of rewiring, and it's almost like retelling a story. It reminds me of something, I've talked about this before, self-serving bias, and going with the story that you were saying earlier, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, and immediately the self-serving bias is, oh, they're a bad person, or they're being a jerk, or there's something wrong with them, right? We immediately take it to the negative. But if we were the one who's in a rush and we're driving really fast and we cut somebody off, then we will naturally have an excuse for it, right?
Yep.
We'll legitimize it in some way. Oh, well, I'm late for work, or,
Mm.
I got to get to the emergency room, whatever the reason is. And that's the
Mm.
self-serving bias part of it.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if we can stop, like you were saying, just stop for a moment and just rethink what's happening there. So later
Mm.
on, okay, what are some other reasons why that person could have been in such a hurry? And it could
Mm.
be that maybe they didn't see you, or maybe they were on their way to the emergency room. Maybe they were, in a hurry because they were told by their boss, if you're late one more time, you're going to get fired, whatever it is. And it has
Mm.
absolutely nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
It's just something that they're just going through a moment, there
Yeah.
in time. And so I really like how, um, your description of it did remind me of that self-serving bias, idea of having taking a moment and just rewriting that, or just at least taking a moment to think about it in a slightly different way, give you a different perspective, of that happening.
Yeah. I guess
Yeah.
another kind of viewpoint on that, I guess,
Mhm.
is that when you think about it, like, quite logically, if when something like that happens,
Mhm.
you allow it to have that effect on you,
Mhm.
it's actually not self-serving at all. It's
Mhm.
actually damaging, right?
Mm. Mhm.
And you could you this is where you can flip it round and say, look,
Mhm.
this behavior is not serving me. Like
Mm,
there are literally so many, like since I've been on this new path, there's just like literally so many times where, say, something has happened during the day, and then my wife has been in the car, and for a fleeting moment I've thought to myself, oh, I'll tell Sally about that thing that happened this morning, or and then I stop myself and say, no, that's not serving me. What
mhm.
what will that achieve? So, oh,
Right.
guess what? I was going down the road this morning, and um, the lights went green. I just pulled out. This car went across, could have killed me. Who'd, and if you basically, just using that example, you want to bring the best person of yourself to work, to your family, your relationships. It's I think it's actually more self-serving if
Mhm.
you think of it that you're actually harming yourself by allowing those things in your life. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love the idea of the intentionality behind that. And this is really big, when I talk about intentional communication as well. And also the importance of responding versus reacting. And so by asking that question, I think it helps in both of those areas.
Mm,
How does this serve me, or how does this serve the other person? you
mm,
know what what is going to be the result of this? When you
yeah.
pause just for a moment to ask those very important questions,
Mm,
I think that could have a huge impact on how you move forward, like you were
exactly.
saying, and sharing,
Mm,
those little
mm,
moments.
mm,
And I think that's a critical point right there. um you had mentioned earlier there are just some things that one can do to help with the rewiring, or to help with, I don't know if it's a mood change or what. You mentioned earlier something as simple as going outside and allowing your feet to touch the grass. As you were describing that, I could feel immediately like I was just feeling better, even just thinking about that. Like, oh
mm,
man, yes.
yeah.
Going outside and just feeling, the nice soft grass on a warm, sunny day, that
Yeah.
immediately just puts me in a better mood, and not even,
Mm,
actually experiencing it. I think that's a brilliant,
yeah.
suggestion for anyone. What are some other tools that you have found that you can use to kind of ground yourself, in that way, to kind of force that pathway, or to force something new, a new thought pattern?
Um, yeah. So in terms of, let's kind of, I think there's like two separate things. There's like, how can I do things that are like better for my well-being and make me feel
Mhm.
better,
Mhm.
and there's also how can I actually change my thought patterns, right?
Okay. Mhm.
And the for changing your thought patterns, um, so that process of, um, what what created that operating system in the first place, that is called mental conditioning, right?
Okay.
Your brain,
Mhm.
your all of these experiences are conditioning your brain. Like, for example, because of the childhood I had, for many years I believed that my parents did not love me. But when
Mhm.
I when I was when I was able to challenge that, and say, well, like, what just because they did what they did, what evidence is there that they did not love you? Like, there's actually probably a lot more evidence that they actually do love you very much, right?
Mm. Mhm.
Um, so I guess there's a conscious pathway to recondition your mind it's not necessarily that easy when we see that there's so many ideas out there about how to do things, right? If I could talk to my earlier self, my younger self, I would say to myself, start learning about things like, just go on YouTube, make it easy. Don't, I'm not talking about taking an academic path, but just start learning about things like what role your hippocampus has, what the amygdala does, and it's absolutely fascinating, right? And the more you start reading this material, if you're anything like me, you kind of get a bug, you get hooked, right?
You get sucked into the rabbit hole, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's a nice rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's not a bad rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it's a rabbit hole full of oases and stuff. Just that knowledge is reconditioning your mind. It's through that knowledge that when situations occur, you'll think back to what you read somewhere as, oh, actually that's happening. If you understand the mechanisms of anxiety, I used to get quite severe anxiety, I think mostly because of the earthquake situation. And when I learned about the mechanism, right, and so really quickly, a part of your brain detects danger, even though 99.99% certain that you're not in danger, but a part of your brain says, I think you're in danger. It fires off some chemicals that initiates the fight or flight response. You then get stressed because you're sensing these chemicals and you don't understand the stress, and it then gets into a vicious loop where before you know it, your hands are shaking, your legs feel like jelly, and you don't know what's going on. But when I learned about the mechanism, I actually remember the time so vividly. I was in the middle of a conversation at a social event, and I started feeling anxious, and I could feel it, that horrible feeling in my fingers and things, and I was actually talking to someone at the time, and I was able to say to myself in the back of my head while I was having the conversation, there's something in this environment, maybe this guy looks somewhat similar to someone that bullied me at school or something, right? This maybe there's a smell in the air that triggers off a time when I had my accident, or so I was able to say, something has triggered that response. Don't worry about it, because what you're feeling is the natural chemical release, and if I don't worry about it, it will just pass. And within a few minutes, it had completely gone away. And that is the kind of thing where you can just work on your kind of mental conditioning, and not wanting to kind of plug the Everyellow app, but that is a mental conditioning app. It just makes it really easy for anyone to do that, using a solid scientific framework.
Yeah.
On the other side of things, you said about the feet on the grass or what have you. A lot of these things have actually been, scientifically validated. Like for example, instead of going 3-4 hours straight or 5 hours straight between starting work and having lunch, if every hour you take 5 or 10 minutes to have a break, go and smell some fresh air, even the act of, say, looking at distant objects, it has a neurologically positive effect. And a lot of these things you can do together, right? So you can go outside and you can walk, right? So walking is getting some oxygen flowing. While you're walking, notice the smells, look at distant objects. All of these things have a positive neurological impact. And I really don't know why it isn't in all businesses today, like enforcing a
Yeah.
10-minute break every hour, because those businesses would do so much better. I looked into the data on it, and it's something like the productivity of a person over a full day will increase by 20 to 30% if they take a 10-minute break every hour.
Isn't that amazing? I'm hearing a theme, and I have a great appreciation for this theme, because in communication, we always talk about it's a process. It's an ongoing process. And so there's no magic answer to all of a sudden becoming this effective public speaker or this effective communicator. And there are certain things that we can do to practice. There's some things that we can pay attention to. But at the end of the day, it's that process. It's that ongoing, just being mindful of the process itself, little tweaks here and there. And then over time, you'll find yourself not even really thinking about it anymore. It's one of those things that as you make it a part of your everyday, whatever it is that you do every day, it's almost like
Yeah.
muscle memory. And it
Yeah.
sounds like this is very similar to that, in that it takes time, and it takes effort to just be in the moment and be mindful, and to think about how this is a process. It's not going to be anything that happens overnight, but then all of a sudden it may feel like one day, wow, when did this switch occur? When did this happen? That's probably one of the coolest things, to be able to, sit there and think, wow, I'm not feeling that way anymore. I'm
Yeah.
not having that reaction
Yeah.
anymore.
In the experience that I had on this journey, basically going from practically suicidal right up to the other end of the spectrum, I think the thing that I would say is that even those really small changes at the beginning were more profound and impactful than the ones I got at the end.
Mhm.
Because like when you're in that state of just not knowing, right, and not being
Mhm.
aware of, like how all of these things are harming you or harming others, it's completely analogous to the mouse on the wheel, right? All
Mhm.
the mouse can see is what's in front, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
if you think of, let's say you've got an unfit mouse on a treadmill plodding along, right? If you take that mouse off the treadmill, the mouse doesn't suddenly become fit, but what the mouse suddenly sees is, oh my God, there's a world out here that's not on the treadmill. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is that
Yeah.
once it actually doesn't take much, once something has illuminated your perspective, that actually I don't want to just be on this treadmill. I want to get off the treadmill. And, maybe when the mouse got on the treadmill, he's in this really big, nice, fancy gym where there's all different things that the mouse can do, right? And that's what it's like, right? And then
Mhm.
you're suddenly on this journey. But I think just getting off that treadmill is a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And I can see all kinds of applications for this. Obviously, just internally for ourselves, this is something that is incredibly helpful, to be able to just gain a different perspective, a wider perspective. But if you're someone who's, a leader in an organization, you have mentioned it just a second ago, if the workforce if we could just tell everybody, take a 10-minute break, we'll be, so much more productive. How would you recommend leaders in different organizations take some of the information that we've been talking about today, some of the concepts, the ideas? How might they be able to use this and make a real impact, in the workplace for their employees?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because over the last year, I've been talking to lots of business leaders, people in HR, well-being, and what have you. I'm starting to form this picture of there's old paradigm leaders and new paradigm leaders. Old paradigm leaders they tend to have this kind of idea of, we've always done workshops and provided employee assistance programs. Why change anything? We don't really want to do anything else because it's people's own personal responsibility to take care of their own well-being. That's not our job. That's not why we're here. Yet new paradigm leaders, they understand two fundamental things. Firstly, they understand the incredible value that comes from investing in the well-being of their people. Any business leader doesn't already understand the monetary impact of investing in their well-being. They really need to go and look, because if they're not aware of it, they're probably losing lots and lots of money. The other thing that new paradigm leaders understand is they need to lead by example. So what that means is instead of just throwing money at the situation, throwing money and saying, "Oh yeah, we do all this for our well-being." What leaders, new paradigm leaders, do is they take really good care and work on their own mental fitness, and they then tell their people about how it's helped them, how it's impacted their life. And instead of saying, "Oh, we're spending this much money for you to do, meditation apps or whatever the things are," instead of that, being able to say, "Look, I've actually been finding that by doing this, I'm sleeping a lot better. I'm having more energy," whatever those things are. It's making my home life better, and I'm more present with my children and things like that. And I'd really like you to have that. Yeah, they're the two things. So it really comes down to understanding the impact that well-being can have on your organization, because it really is profound. So even that taking 10 minutes every hour kind of thing can have an enormous impact on burnout. And burnout is at an all-time high. And the reason it's an all-time high is that the landscape has changed post-COVID. There's a lot of companies that have had to downsize, and that means that there's even more pressure and work on the people that are left behind. Just taking some steps to make things easier for their people can have a huge effect. Depending on whether you look at data from Deloitte's or one of the other big research firms, burnout today is costing employers somewhere between $2,000 and $3,600 for every $10,000 in salary that they're paying for their entire workforce. And that burnout is affecting, I think, somewhere between 60-70% of people, just because you look at your team and think, well, they look fine. they're doing their work, So if leaders get a much better understanding of the true impact of a mentally fit workforce, and they do truly lead well-being by example, then that would be a really good place to start.
And there's something very important that you said I wanted to just highlight. It's critical for these leaders to be able to be the example for their workforce. And I think all too often, somebody will get into a leadership position and then all of a sudden they feel like, oh, well, I have to be so stoic. I have to be the one with all the answers. I have to be the one that has it together. And everyone has to look at me and understand that I'm in charge, and that if anything's going on, I'm kind of like, I'm the rock here. I'm the foundation. And really, when you think about it, that's not how we relate to each other as humans, right? I mean, just
that's right.
Listening to you tell your story and being willing to share that story, and sharing that vulnerable aspect of yourself,
Mm,
that's what creates that connection between humans. And
mm,
so if there are any leaders out there, any managers out there who are listening to this, I really hope they take that aspect of it to heart, that you're not being viewed as a weak person if you share your experiences with your workforce. And if you are willing to share with them, these things that you have tried and you have been able to put to practice some of
mm.
these things, to improve your own mental fitness and well-being, then that's only going to create even stronger relationships across the board as well. That
Yeah.
has to be good for your workforce. If you are a speaker or an event planner, you really should check out the Innovation Women website. Innovation Women has placed hundreds of women on stages across the world. Whether you are a beginner looking to book your first speaking gig or a seasoned professional looking to expand your connections, I highly recommend that you give Innovation Women a try.
Kind of just to bring a bit of like humor, but truth to it as well, is I'm very familiar with workplaces, especially with younger workforces.
Mm-hmm.
And the younger workforces, the younger people are much more attuned to, mental health and all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
When they've got these stoic leaders like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
your workforce don't believe you anyway.
Right. Yeah.
They just
You're full of it.
yeah, they just see you as a BS artist, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
and behind your back, they're all laughing about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Look at this person. They got it. They have it so together, don't they?
yeah. Just being real and letting people see the real you. Oh, I think that just goes so far. You get so much more respect, so much more out of your people than if you're that person that's just trying to create that facade, right? And at the end of the day, that facade that many of us live behind, you're just putting layers on this egg that one day is going to crack, right?
Yeah.
And
it will crack.
yeah.
And once it cracks, it gets messy. So we don't want to have that. So
That's right.
tell us a little bit about your app. What's going on with the app? How is it being used? And how is it being helpful?
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions I get is like, why the hell did you create an app when there's already hundreds out there already, right? And
it's a crowded field, right?
It's a crowded field. Just going back to when I had my breakdown, I was given a list of apps to try, like meditation apps, journaling apps, all these different types of things. And none of them helped me. And I thought it was something wrong with me. I later discovered that there's very, very little evidence of efficacy of any of these apps. There was a study done just last year, in fact, involving 50,000 people, and it split those into two groups. One group, they were using one of the top 30 mental well-being apps. I won't mention names, but we all know what they are. And the other group,
advertisements all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. The other group were basically not doing anything. And there was no statistical difference between the two groups.
Oh, wow.
The other thing that it kind of horrified me, but it didn't surprise me, was when I learnt that even the best performing of these apps, over 96% of them are deleted within 2 weeks, and some of them are like less than 0.5%, right?
Yeah.
So that was the why, right? I basically could see that there are literally billions of people in the world that, they're not necessarily mentally unwell, but they're struggling with their, stress, burnout,
Sure.
feeling that life is a bit, life sucks or whatever, and there aren't the tools to help them. So that's when I decided I wanted to do something about it. And what we basically found, we did quite a bit of research first. I come from a research and design background, an innovation background myself, and I really wanted to understand what the problem was with the existing apps. And there were three main things. One is that people found them tedious and mundane. They just didn't really want to spend time with them. If you're asked to watch a TV series and if you don't like the first episode, you're not going to listen to
That's right.
anymore, are you?
Yeah, you lost them.
Yeah. The second reason was that people find these things to be quite difficult to fit into their life. Even things like meditation, right? Over 70% of people would not do meditation. Some people might see it as too old-fashioned or old school. But for a lot of people, it's things like, I don't have the time or space to do it. I where I live with my family, I can't do that kind of thing. Ask many people to do things like journaling and it's just really uncomfortable for them. They just don't want to do it. And the third thing is that people would try these apps for maybe a week or two and felt no difference, so they stopped. So what we wanted to do with Eviello was create an app that had a very solid scientific core to it and was an enjoyable experience and was really, really easy to fit into your life. Earlier on, I spoke about this process called mental conditioning and neuroplasticity. It actually harnesses that for a positive effect. What happens is when you first download the app, we ask some questions that take just a couple of minutes to fill out. So we really get to understand your kind of well-being profile. We then download a whole bunch of narrated content to your phone, and that content is education, knowledge, motivation, guidance. And then once you have that, every time you press play, it's like doing circuit training for your brain, right? You listen to this lovely audio experience that basically blends these narrations against a backdrop of music and sound. And you don't even have to think about how long have I got. You just press let's play and you stop when you're done. You can change the music to be how you want it to be. Every time you listen, we generate a new session every time. There's a lot of technology going on under the hood. We have 10 different measures of well-being: sleep quality, motivation, energy, relationship quality, all of these different things. 78% of people had at least some improvement across all 10 areas within 1 week. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
But what was even more amazing is that within 1 week, it might have been lower numbers, like 40, 50%, but in some specific areas, like say 40, 50% of people had a moderate to significant improvement in their sense of self-worth, for example, or their sense of optimism. And one of the most impactful features, I guess, around the app is that you literally can use it at any time, like even when you're working. The player basically has a slider that allows you to adjust the balance of music and voice. So you can turn the voice right down, so all you're really hearing is the music. You can then get on with your work, but all while you're listening, those messages are still getting through at a subconscious level. We've had lots of people that have come to me and told me their story of how changing their life or their reaction in a certain situation. And I've said, oh, thanks for sharing that. And they said, oh, no, that's not the bit I'm excited about. They said, I've never actually listened to the words. They said, I just can't believe that when this situation happened, the messaging came back to me, but like in my own voice, like in my own head kind of thing.
Wow.
We're a social impact venture, which means that making impact is a priority over like revenue and money. So as part of that, we believe that money should never be a barrier to well-being. So the free version of the app is comprehensive, and you can use that forever. So if you truly can't afford to pay, then there's a highly effective well-being app that's always there for you. But we also have a premium version that has a lot more content, more backing tracks and that kind of thing. And we also have an offering for businesses as well that allows them to give that to their people. But we also can aggregate and anonymize the data so that you can track well-being in your organization in real time.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So we know that it's working. It is a true paradigm shift in how mental wellbeing apps are done. Although it's not really designed for the lower end of mental wellbeing, we know that it's, definitely helping people with depression and PTSD. It's helped people out of even self-harm situations. We've recently just completed a trial with a university here with their staff, and within 1 month, practically all people within that group, that their well-being had shown a positive improvement, like quite a significant improvement, and that has a tangible effect on everything in the organization, right? The culture, everything.
I can think of just so many different audiences that I would encourage to at least try, because it's easy to say, well, it's just another app, but I'm a big believer in you gotta at least try, because I know we all are so stressed out, overwhelmed, burned out, like you were saying, not only in our workspaces, but getting over this, pandemic, and you've got students who are in school who are stressed out. You've got, like earlier I mentioned to you before we started recording, today is my 5-year anniversary of being cancer free, as a breast cancer survivor. And so there's a lot of stuff though that still continues. Anyone who's a cancer survivor would be able to relate to that there's still stuff in the background that you have to deal with emotionally and, mentally. Also, I'm recently divorced. My husband and I were together for 27 years, and now all of a sudden, and this was recent, so I can imagine people who are also in that same situation. If you have this recent big event that has happened, let's not be that person that says, oh, it'll go away. It's fine. Like you said earlier, there will be cracks that will begin. There's no shame in saying, hey, maybe this is something that I could try out. And if you're already a podcast listener, hello, this isn't going to be a big stretch for you, right?
Yeah.
To just add this in.
There's one person in particular I spoke to, I don't know, the accents or the voices or something, or the type of messaging kind of, I said, I'm not really sure that I really like it. This is like an older guy that's he's a biker, and it's kind of like, I don't do this kind of thing,
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And he runs of an evening, right? And I said, look, just do this for me. Turn the voice down, so and just put on like the chill hip hop track or whatever it is that you want to listen to. Just listen for at least 10 minutes a day. And I encourage everyone to use a technique called habit stacking. And that's where you tie your whatever habit you want to do, you tie it to something that you already do so that you always remember. Walk the dog. I will listen to it when I have my breakfast, or when I'm whatever those things are. Right?
When I'm washing the dishes, when I'm vacuuming, when I'm sweeping, whatever it is. Yeah. And
I said, so use habit stacking. Use it for at least 10 minutes a day. Anyway, he contacted me after a couple of weeks, because I just completely forgot about it. And he said, Alan, I need to talk to you about the app. And I thought, what's going on here? Because as an aside, he's one of my investors, right?
Oh, so you're bracing yourself.
I thought, he said, look, I did what you said. I can't believe it. He said, like, I'm now running faster than I've ever run before.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like he said, like, I don't know what's happened, but something's happened. To think how that mindset shift in 2 weeks has led him to run faster is incredible. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it just took some mental barriers away or something. I don't know. Gave him a bit more energy or optimism or something.
Himself out.
Yeah. But there's really no excuse not to just give it 7 days. See if you feel a shift. We get so many people that say, "Yep, I've felt the shift."
That's exciting. That this is an important topic. I think it's worth the time to spend having these conversations, and not just having the conversation about feeling overwhelmed and feeling burned out and feeling stressed and, depression and anxiety, because I think that's important to talk about it. And I think it's important that we all feel comfortable communicating about these things. But I think what's even more important about this conversation is for people to take away that there is something that we can try, or even if it just gets a little bit better, that it's better than nothing. And so I just want to encourage everyone to give this a try. And I know somebody out there is thinking, oh, it's just one more thing, but what is it going to hurt?
Yeah.
Honestly, what is it going to hurt?
Yeah, but that's one of the biggest bits of feedback that we get is that people love it because it's not another thing to do.
Yeah,
it's
I love it. So, how do we find you?
If you want to find out more about the app at everyellow.com, you can just go to either of the Google or Apple app stores and download it for free. If you're interested in trialing it within your company, then contact me on LinkedIn. Just plug in my name, Alan Cox, and you'll find me there. If there's anyone out there that wants to contribute in some other way, then I'm all ears as well.
I will make sure that all the links are there in the show notes so it's easily accessible. And I'm excited for my listeners. So I'm really hoping that they really do give this a try, because that's really the whole point of doing this podcast. As a communicator, and at the end of the day, that just means building stronger relationships. But we all know that starts on the inside. We got to be able to get the insides right. Thanks again so much, Alan, for joining us. I truly appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. It's been really cool.
All right, everybody. You have a great rest of your day, and we will catch you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review.